David Frum has enjoyed the last few years being both an author, strategist, columnist, and for a short time speechwriter for the current president, George W. Bush. During that time, he helped create the term axis of evil. He has just released a new book called Comeback: Conservatism That Can Win Again. Now an exclusive interview with David Frum. Mr. Frum, thank you for joining us on The Standard. Do you think George W. Bush has destroyed the Republican Party so they're not going to win in November?
Well, parties don't get destroyed, but they can be damaged. And I think the Republicans are in a lot of trouble. Nothing is inevitable in politics, and we're still many months out. The Republicans can do things right, the Democrats can do things wrong. But you just have to, looking objectively at the situation, say, the wind is at the Democratic Party's back, and the Republicans are in a lot of trouble. But not just because of George Bush and not just because of Iraq. The problem is much deeper.
Well, take me to some of the depth, because your new book, which is a really interesting exploration of conservatism, that's a little different than what most people think of conservatism. What is the change that's going on?
Well, you see, look, you see the decay begin in the late 1990s. The conservative movement that I grew up in, that I spent my life in, came together as a set of solutions to the problems of the 1970s, the inflation, the social disarray, the aggression of the Soviet Union. And it had powerful answers to all of those questions. It's still offering the same answers 3 decades later. And a new generation finds those answers increasingly inadequate. And so you've seen a move of young people away from the Republican Party. We have seen, as society changes, the Republican groups, the married, the church-going, the middle income, the middle education, they're shrinking. The Democratic groups, the richest and the poorest, the unmarried, the unchurched, they are growing. And it is creating a situation in which the Republicans look more and more obsolete.
You talked about the unchurched is the party of the Democrats, and yet the Democrats have, in a sense, found religion in this election. Everyone's talking about their Christian values and their Christian faith. Has that been an intentional move on the Democratic Party?
Yeah. Well, look, some of this is accidental. That the Democrats, for example, have a candidate. Their most appealing and attractive candidate has an Islamic name. And so he has to talk a lot about religion to answer a question that is not being asked, which is, are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim apostate? So the more he talks about Christianity, the more he at least offers an answer to that question that has circulated in a lot of, some of these Democratic primaries. Somebody or other is making phone call whispering campaigns to say, watch out, Barack Hussein Obama is a Muslim.
Right. As you look at obviously we're a couple of months out, we're quite a few months out yet. You talked about mistakes could be made, positive things could be done. Has anyone in the Republican, any of the candidates, grabbed your book and said, these ideas, I want to embody them?
Not yet. And I worry, like, organizations being what they are, it's very hard for an organization that has been successful in the past to change in anticipation of a problem. The usual human instinct is to hope for the best, to believe it's not as bad as it looks. You'll muddle through, and then afterwards, you'll see. I am trying to persuade my party to change in advance of a calamity in 2008.
And you think it's a calamity?
I fear a calamity. Here's why.
Yeah.
If this defeat is big, it has been a long time since we have seen a Democratic president elected with a strong mandate. Bill Clinton never got 50% of the vote. Jimmy Carter barely scraped by over 50. You have to go back to Lyndon Johnson to find a big presidential win. Bill Clinton, with his non-mandate, had a difficult situation with Congress. Jimmy Carter actually lost congressional seats as compared to what they had before he was elected in 1976. The Democrats will surely gain seats in 2008. So you're going to have a president with a mandate, intensified Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. There is going to be an opportunity here for a 1980 in reverse, for an ideological shift, one of those once-in-a-generation ideological shifts in which the United States swings to the left. And as someone
why is that a calamity, though?
Well,
many people are applauding that.
Well, if you're on the left, it's good news. Yeah, no, for them it'll be lovely. But for people who believe still in limited government, the rule of law, strong national defense, the core of the Republican message, it will be a calamity. We are going to see the country moving in directions that it looked like in 1980 we had reversed forever.
But you talk about calamity, meaning that there's obviously something intrinsically problematic about a Democratic government that's going to reduce maybe military spending. It's going to be bad for America.
Well, if you see a pullback from America's role in the world, that is a calamity. I believe if you say a government takeover of the healthcare system, that will be a calamity. I believe that if you see a failure to enforce the continuing failure to enforce the immigration laws in the United States, that will be a calamity. All of those things are what one might expect from a big Democratic win.
The last book you talked about the issue of terrorism.
Yes.
And you had a pretty clear policy on what
Yeah.
needs to be done about terrorism. And many people would say the American people are not interested in moving into 6, 7 fronts, putting military presence all over the place.
It's pretty clear that the American people have indeed, as you say, decided that 9/11 is part of history. I think they're wrong about that. But
What do you mean wrong? What do you mean?
I mean that the Islamic extremism is as real as ever. It is powerful, and we don't quite know why it is that there has not been an attack on American or North American soil since 9/11. I fear we may just have gotten lucky. But the clear mood of the Americans is, let's put this all behind us and move on to domestic issues. I think that's just an abdication. But I have to recognize it as a reality, and politics has to deal with it. And in the sections of the book on foreign policy, I talk about how do you keep the country engaged. One of the things I propose, for example, is I'm a deep skeptic about the Iranian regime. But I propose that the United States attempt to open diplomatic relations with Iran. Okay. Not because I think it will work, but because I think it will fail. However, I think it is just outrageous that the United States is in a situation where many people around the world think the difficulties between the United States and Iran are because of America. Let's expose that by being more diplomatically active.
And they have to then play their hand and show the extremism that they are, is what you're saying.
Yeah, invite them. Say, okay, we'll sit down and we'll talk with you. Because they can't, because they need this relationship to be hostile.